Hi, everybody. Today's guest is Jared Deacon. Jared, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, are you in sunny Scotland?
It is actually quite sunny today, surprisingly. It's been not bad weather recently.
Well, and it's not too bad in South Shields, and we have a big South Shields connection, don't we?
Yeah, I'm originally from South Shields, grew up there, lived there until my mid-20s, after which, for work reasons primarily, ended up moving away down to Loughborough for a few years, and then moving up to Scotland to work in rugby up here.
Fab, there's another connection. We were just talking before we went live in terms of actually our connections over the years. And my mum trained with your dad, and then I went to college with Dave, who's your oldest brother.
Yeah,
And then your other brother, Stu, rang me when I was in Utah and he was in Idaho. And then I guess you spent quite a bit of time with my new wife at college and university.
yeah.
And then when you were PDM, we did some work together when I was at Sports Coach UK. And then Susan did some work for me as well. And I also went to Loughborough too. So there's another
Yeah,
connection.
yeah. And I used to see you at the Westovians Theatre pantomime every year as well. You always seem to pick the same night that we went.
Yeah, thanks for reminding everybody about that. Yeah, I'd forgotten all about that too. And I guess there's also a thing with the Mormon Church as well, with me being in Utah as well, and and your family being a big part of that fraternity
Yeah,
too. So we
yeah.
have all these big connections, and sometimes you just lose track with everybody. So it's great to catch up. But let's have a chat about you and what you've done. Do you want to just fill everybody in terms of your history and background?
Well, I used to be a 400-metre runner. Ran for South Shields Harriers amongst other athletics teams as well. And so I competed internationally from 1994, running on the junior team, through to 2004, running the senior team. And during that time, I ran at not every championships that was on, but I went to every major championship. So I went to World Championships, a couple of World Championships, Commonwealth Games a couple of times, European Championships, Olympic Games, World Indoors, and a few others, European Cup and stuff in between all that. Probably the best achievement. Olympics sort of stands on its own, although I didn't win a medal at the Olympics. Being at that event, running in an Olympic final was great. But then in 2002, I ran in the relay squads in Manchester in the Commonwealth Games, and we won the gold medal by 100th of a second, beating the Welsh team there. And then 11 days later, running on the GB squad, where it was 2 of the English team and 2 of the Welsh team from that Commonwealth Games, and we won the European Championships in the relay there as well. So it's a combination of Europeans, Commonwealths, medals, and going to the Olympic Games. And then in amongst all that, went to university, became a PE teacher, and at the back end of my career, started coaching, and I've coached S&C-wise quite a few different sports. I've also coached athletes to Olympic Games, World Championships, and one girl in particular who won a bronze medal in Rio in the relay. Emily Diamond was someone that I coached as well. So I've been there as an athlete. I understand it from that perspective. And now working as a coach across different sports is really interesting. Working in individual sports and team sports, and then working with athletes in the events that I used to run in as well is exciting and interesting.
Yeah, so you have this whole family history of running, I guess, in athletics. Was there any stage where you kind of thought, I should go and play tennis at Wester with Graham?
No chance. My hand-eye coordination shocking. My younger brother John, he could turn his hand to most sports. I could my older brother Dave, and Dave was my coach for a long time through my career. Even when he wasn't necessarily the lead coach, he was still always there. He was still like the main person who drove. Like in the background of my athletics career, if I was the person at the front on the start line, he was that constant behind me there. And a lot of the council built facilities, I'll call them facilities, council built things in South Shields and South Tyneside turned into training facilities for us. So like the stairs that go from the car park at the Little Haven Beach up to the Lower Top. I grew up on the Lower Top, and that was a brilliant training facility for me. And I know groups now go and use that quite a bit, but we got looked at pretty strangely when we started doing sessions down there, doing plyometrics and bounding work down there, doing sprints up to the top. It was a bit unusual to be seen. We did car pushing in the car park there. And the number of times that people would come along and say, do you want a hand, mate? And I'm like, well, I would, but I'm actually doing it for my training. A lot of the facilities and stuff, and being around South Tyneside, that was just used over the years as natural training venues.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that as well, because again, there goes another connection. So when I was at college with your Dave, and your Dave was always into training, and athletics probably was a little bit ahead of tennis at the time. We used to do all of our training on the court more than off the court. So Dave used to come and pick me up, running wise, pick me up, and we used to run down to the beach, and just where those steps are around the corners, that big bank where the I think it's the Marine Training Centre is, where they do all of the water stuff based on there. It used to make me do sprint training up and down that bank. And I can always remember that was almost my first introduction into the world of physical training in terms of having an impact on my sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important thing, really. Like with athletics, certainly within the sprints, it's not one of those things where if you're doing different things, you don't call it training and then S&C. It certainly wasn't a term even at the time. Everything was just training. So if a sprinter is doing a day where they're just doing maybe some plyometric work and weight training, they don't see that, as I've missed a day out of running, I've missed a day from doing my sport. It's just everything is training. Everything's contributing towards the goal, and it just contributes in slightly different ways. And that's one of the big benefits of a sprinter's type of attitude and brain, is that they don't compartmentalize things and hierarchy it in a way where, this is a bit rubbish and I don't really want to spend time on it. It's, they value everything because they can see how it all interlinks together. And most sports are a little bit further behind that. They don't see it in that way. They'll go, I'm doing my sport, or now I'm doing this stuff, and how does this really cross over and how does it work? And good coaches from the sports side will understand how it can cross over, and good S&C coaches will enable that to cross over as well. I actually prefer the term physical preparation. We're preparing people physically, and you have a technical coach and a tactical coach who are doing the more sport-specific stuff. Because it's not just limited to strength and conditioning work. It's, there's a whole lot more comes into that. It's all about the holistic physical preparation.
No, I agree, and certainly tennis now, and I've been involved in tennis for over 40 years as a player and as a coach, and I'm still county captain for Durham and Cleveland, still play over 35s. And one of the things, well, I'm probably closer to a little bit older age group, but we'll stick with the 35s because it sounds all right. But one of the things we've done really badly, I think, in tennis generally, but I think other sports as well, is that we do silo things. And everything's going, right, okay, your S&C day to day, go and see Jared. Yes, performance psychology today, go and see Graham. Right, technical day to day. And then some of the athletes aren't aware of the fact that actually everything intertwines. You can do a session that is purely S&C on a tennis court while you're doing some technical stuff at the same time.
Yeah, if people have got that mindset and that ability to work together and pull those things together, it can work. It's easy to silo it and section it up, and that's sort of how it's come about through institutes and that sort of thing. And there's not too much of an issue with that if things are coordinated well and people do talk to each other. But getting into someone's sport and attending time with them at their sport and understanding their sport makes it a whole lot easier from my side of things. I understand an amount about a whole range of sports now, and there are some great similarities between sports, and there's some great differences as well that different sports can learn from each other. And when I was working in the gym at Gateshead and seeing quite a few different sports come in, it would often be guess the sport because of what they're wearing, what body shape they are, heights and that sort of thing. But each sport brought a bit of their own culture into the gym, but there's also a culture within the gym itself. And what you don't expect is people to wholly flip and just operate how they should do or how we think they should do for a gym point of view. We've got to adapt ourselves to meet their culture a little bit as well. So we create like that crossover, that grey area between the two, so that everyone's comfortable with that, but everyone's stretched a little bit at the same time. So how rowers operate, we'll take a little bit of how they operate out on the water and bring a bit of that into the gym culture. The women footballers was a similar one. And probably the best example was working with sports acrobatics. So you do the usual thing where you're working with an athlete, and there's a really experienced guy who I was working with, world medalist, and he's doing his lifts, and I'm like, right, do you think you could put a bit more on that for the next set? How comfortable is that one? He's like, yeah, probably. He says, and he just looked at us at one point and he went, Jared, if you think I can lift more weight on it, just tell us to put more on and I'll do it. I was like, okay, that's how you want it to work. That's fine. And I just reflected on that, and I thought, right, that's how he's coached within his sport. It's a little bit more dictatorial. It's like, I think you can do this. This is how you need to do it. Go ahead and do it. and he needed and felt he needed to be coached a little bit more in that way, whereas someone else, maybe one of the Paralympic athletes who maybe had some learning difficulties and some physical difficulties, you had to treat them totally differently, or that person I'm thinking of totally differently to get a result out of her. And so as a coach, it makes you really adaptable to the needs of that individual, not just from a exercise selection, sets and reps and that sort of thing, but how you communicate that with them. Because if it's not communicated right, if it's not put across in the right way, if it's not described well, if it's not demonstrated in the way that they need to see that, we're not going to get the sort of result that we're after out of them, and they're going to get frustrated as well.
And do you think the fact that you've got a combination of all these things in terms of, yes, you've ran, you've been an athlete, you've done it, you've been there, you've also coached, you've also got a little bit of pedagogy knowledge behind you as well. Do you think all of those things have really had an impact in terms of how you deliver S&C? Because I've seen some really good S&C coaches, and I'm not going to mention the name that's on at 9 o'clock that we were talking about earlier, but I've also seen the people who just literally will either beast everybody in the gym, or they will be all about, how they stand in the gym more than the athletes.
Yeah, I think that combination of stuff helps. I mean, I'm a lot older now as well, and you're drawing your experiences over the years, and that helps. And the different types of athletes that you work with, everyone's an individual experimentation. You can't just expect the same results or better results sticking the same stuff on different people. So it's always having a bit of a framework, but then finding out how that person is going to work best and trying to get feedback and educate them as well. But I think there's a lot more qualified S&C coaches coming out now. There's a lot more courses around that at undergraduate level, at master's level. UKSC is in existence, whereas none of that was in existence when I first started. And so I would liken myself in terms of my education as drawing from coaches that I got coached from, drawing from other athletes I trained alongside, starting to read stuff, look at stuff. And it's a bit like a musician who gets an instrument and plays with that instrument and learns their instrument. They're not educated through a formal setting of, we'll learn this first, then we'll learn this, then we'll learn this, then we'll learn this. I've added some of that formal learning to it for certain. But in the first place, I was playing with the instrument and finding out how it worked and coming up with things that maybe I'd used before and had to tweak around. And it's an interesting way of approaching it and doing it. But I think that methodology allows me to be inventive in what I do. I'm always looking for alternative ways of getting results. So having worked with, as I mentioned, Paralympians, or working with rugby players who are just coming off an operation and they can't do this, they can't do that, they're going to have to work in this way, they're going to have to work in that. I'm prepared to try lots of different ways, as ridiculous as we might look in the gym sometimes doing it, to try to get that result out and look for other pathways to get what I need, which isn't going to come through a book, it's not going to come through research, it's going to come through trial and error, thinking about things, looking at things that I've done in the past, talking to other people about their experiences, what they've done in that situation, and coming up with some options to try out in the gym. So I definitely feel like that is one of my strengths. I wouldn't necessarily call it inventiveness, but lack of, I don't put many barriers up to it. We'll have a go at anything,
And I guess that's a really good point, because we're in a really interesting time at this moment in time. I'm in my house and you're sat in your house. And I think one of the biggest connections that we can have within the world of sport, and whether it's technical, tactical, physical or mental, is the fact that you get a real good feel for an athlete, don't you, when you're with them. And whether you're technically trying to teach them something over Zoom, or you technically try to show them something, or you get them to read a book, I still think this little human connection that we have face to face when we're on the court, in the gym, in the pool area, wherever we are, that's where you can really gain some big gains with our athletes. Not only in the trust and the honesty side of things, because you need that, but in the communication as well as obviously all the other things that you're working with them on too.
Yeah, and it's sussing out the level of communication that each athlete wants and needs as well. And someone like Emily, who I mentioned before, the 400-meter runner, I coached her from a distance. I worked with her at Loughborough every day for a few years. We went our separate ways with various moves and things, and then I started coaching again. But she was based in Bath, and I was based up here. And she would come up sort of 3 or 4 days a month, and we'd do bits and pieces. But the fact that I'd worked with her for that long, I knew her really well. She knew the routines well, but she would do a lot of videoing and feed that back to me, even to the point of between sets in the gym. I would get a video and I would be able to feed back to her, or it would be a live thing like this, or she would have someone video her session from the day when she was one with her training and send that across. We'd have a like a Skype or a Zoom and chat that through. And so she would get the same amount of feedback, but it just wasn't time framed the same way as it would be previous. It's never going to be as good as being face to face with someone, but you find ways and means to make it work. And the fact that she was a good communicator and I was able to reciprocate that made that relationship work. And she was able to train like that for a few years and win medals doing it. By no stretch was it perfect, but it shows there are ways and means to get around situations.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the fact that if you're an athlete and you want to get around it, you will find it. And that's where, I guess, defining that passion for your sport really is. And if you haven't really got the love and the passion for your sport, will that push you to go that extra 1% and still work with your coach and still kind of go, hold on a second, I've just done this rep, have a little look at that, what do you think?
Yeah, you'll find a way. That's the thing. That's probably harking a little bit back to that previous little conversation we're having there about that innovation sort of side of things, is prepared to find a way, trying not to put the barriers up. So one of the things we found training in South Shields, for example, during the winters, leaves on the ground, things getting frozen, trying to do hill sessions. We found a hill, and I can't even remember the name of the road. I think it's alongside the marine park. It goes from down by the fair, and it goes up to the top and over the top, and you end up at the town hall.
Yeah, I know the road.
And so I used to do that hill. I've literally run up that hill thousands of times, but it was fantastic. One, for the angle, the surface was good, but because it faced the sea, it got a lot of salt air, so it never really froze up. And so finding venues like that you knew you could use regularly, we had to actually drive around the town and this is a good hill. It works really well. And then we found that first winter we used it. It doesn't get frozen up either. Right, fantastic. So we'll use this forevermore. And even down to, I trained on that hill on my own a lot. And what I used to do was the shorter runs that we do at that hill, there was a gate going into the marine park, and it was also opposite a T-junction coming along from where Westwood Colliery was. Not Westwood Colliery. Yeah, Westwood Colliery. And where the Dragon is,
Yeah.
And as a car would get to the corner there, I would time the start of my run. So I'd race the car up the hill. And if it was the first lamppost I was running to, which was about a 9-second run, if the car wasn't a sports car, I could beat it to that one, to the next one up, which was another 10 seconds longer. I generally got beaten to that. If it was a motorbike, I was out. They were gone. But it was interesting because even in the dark, so their headlights would be coming along. You would see this body behind the signs that were there, and then take off. And some of them really went for it, properly tried to race me up the hill. It was great. And others just there, looking at me what on earth is this idiot doing? But it motivated me. I would see the lights coming along. Yeah, I've got another 10 seconds or so. I'll stretch it a little bit to race this car. Come along. And even if they didn't know they were getting raced, it motivated me to do it. Yeah. So I would find a way to make that session better. And you're always looking for that. You're always looking for that extra little 0.5% or whatever it might be, just to make that thing that little bit better than what it might have been. And that could just be consideration of the weather on the day and running the right direction around the track to get as much of your run as possible with the wind. It might be taking the opportunity when, looking at tide times, for instance, when I used to run on the beach. Right, I'll get down when the tide's right out so I can run on the nice flat sand, or deliberately going down at times. Remember some of the times on the steps in the winter when it was snowing, and I would wear my spikes in the snow because I could get a bit of a grip, which I couldn't do in the trainers. Yeah. And just little things like that make a difference to make that training session that little bit better than what it might have been. And cumulatively, over the weeks and the months and the years, that starts to add up. Because as a young'un, I would never have been picked out as anything talent-wise. And coming of a family of 8, and there was 4 boys in that. My younger brother, John, good rugby player, good footballer, hand-eye for badminton, squash, tennis, really good. Could just put his spikes on and run a decent race over 1, 2 or 4. Stu, again, good runner 2, 4 and 8, very talented with that. But then our Dave could turn his hand to any ball game. I remember him turning up for a golf competition at something at work, and he beat all the lads at work, and they're like, you're a ringer. He's like, I've never played, but I just analyse how you're doing things, and ended up beating them. So within the family there's some talent there, but for me, I was always the one sort of last picked, if you like, on family days out and that sort of thing. And it was like, maybe Jared will be the academic one because he's certainly not a sporting one. And it was just through sheer bloody mindedness and hard work that I managed to pull out what I had inside. But that was working with Dave as well. You know, I wouldn't never call him like a slave driver or anything like that, because he analysed what he thought I needed to do. And, you know, as a brother I shared a bedroom with, so he knew me well. And he, on a couple of occasions, one in particular, had to give us a couple of talking tos as I was learning how to train. And one of those ones, it was one of my first ever training sessions at the track, and I joined in with some reps, and then I missed out a couple because it was getting quite hard, and I joined in the last one and beat everyone, and no one likes it when you do that. And on the way home, he just firmly but calmly explained to me that that is not the way to train. It's like, you do the session that's set out, you do it the way it's designed to, and you get the results from it from that. I don't want to see you dropping out of things again and then getting your energy back and coming back in. I was like, okay, learned from that, never did it again. But I needed some of those lessons as we went along. And as an athlete at the time, I didn't like to hear it. But as a coach now, I fully understand where he was coming from. And it's those sort of things that I learned from him as a coach, which I then can use with the athletes. And I'll say, I know you don't like to hear this, but this is how it is and this is how it needs to be.
Yeah, there's certainly different maturation points, isn't there, with athletes where they're quite happy to take on board information. Then there's other times where they just want to shut up shop because either ego's getting in the way or they just haven't matured enough to actually accept some of that honesty. So that, for me, that communication is huge. And I can always remember my dad used to play at Westow, as you know, as well, and was a good senior county player. And he used to just be my coach because in those days you didn't necessarily have coaches. And I certainly didn't have an S&C guy. S&C was 2 letters of the alphabet that never went together in the 80s. G and T seems to have gone together quite a lot over the last 20 years, but not S&C. So I remember him saying one day that, you know, he had a bit of a go at me about, you know, my performances and the fact that I didn't train and my ability and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't think we spoke for a little while. And it wasn't because of the fact that he wasn't right, because he's 100% right. Just that communication got lost between father and son, coach, player. And maybe we just didn't get that right. And then I think it was about a year and a bit later, and I turned around and said, you need to take me back to Westow, because I'd almost lost that bit of knowledge. And that was purely on me. And you have to sit with that as an athlete sometimes and listen. But it's a difficult thing to take on board. And when you can take it on board, you accelerate your ability level pretty quickly, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got to be, what you're looking for as an affordable, you've got to be adaptable, you've got to seek change. But often athletes are seeking that change physically, whereas actually they've got to change, it sounds a little bit generalization, but they've got to change mentally as well. There's got to be changes that happen up here as well as in the heart, as well as in the belly, as well as in the guts. You've got to push those barriers. One of the things that Dave explained to me really well, and as an analogy, he was really good with the analogies, was, you know, imagine you stood and you've got, you know, the barriers that they use to keep crowds back.
Yeah.
So you've got these metal barriers. Imagine you stood in the middle and there's like a hexagon, let's say, of these metal barriers around you. And that's your abilities. That's the size of your abilities. In order to increase your abilities, you've got to get to that metal barrier and you've got to actually push it back. You can't push it back when being stood in the middle. So here's your speed barrier. You've got to push that one back. And then you've got to push your endurance barrier back. You've got to push your technical barrier back. You've got to push whatever mental barriers back as well. But you've got to get to them. But you can't leave any barrier alone for too long, because it's going to start to shrink back in again. So you've got to constantly be working on all of these different areas, but you've got to take yourself to a certain point and push beyond that to get these improvements. And, you know, people over the years that I've coached, the good athletes are prepared to do that. They like to listen. They like to learn. They want to learn. They ask good questions. And then there's others that you can see are like, they've got a good amount of talent as a youngster, but they've never really been taught how to like push those barriers and go into that uncomfortable place. And it was one of the things that I noted quite strongly in the first probably year and a half of working as a pure S&C coach. I was always quite comfortable in the gym, enjoyed the gym work. Never necessarily amazing at it, but I enjoyed being in there, felt quite comfortable. But then you'd work with that, like a top level swimmer, and they're in the gym and they're getting really frustrated at stuff, which is actually really basic because they're just learning it, even though they're 23, 24, 25, that they're just learning it and they're pushing these barriers back. And it took me a bit of realization of being like, actually, yeah, these people are used to doing things they're really good at. They're used to getting praised a lot. They're used to having little tweaks here and there made, but in general, they're in control of things and they're doing stuff good on a daily basis. They're a good footballer, they're a good swimmer, they're a good rugby player, and they're just getting better at that. Whereas they come in here and they're not good, and they're looking at other people that they're nowhere near in technical terms or load terms or whatever they quantified it as in their brain. And we really had to take that step back as S&C coaches, and how do we explain this to these athletes? How do we make them more comfortable with that, yet still challenge them at the same time? And it was just that realization that, yeah, they're so used to being good at what they do that this is a bit of an alien field to them now.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time with some of the teams and players that I work with as well, in the fact that they either sit in two categories there. They'll either sit in the comfort zone where they will do their 10 reps, 3 times 10 lots of reps at a nice easy balance and makes them look good and feel good and stuff, but it's not pushing them. Or they'll be completely in fear zone where they literally just aren't prepared or don't know how to go that extra level, to add that extra 1%. And it's till you can get out of those two zones and you get into that learning frame and that learning mindset that you're able to push those barriers back, as you said. And then once you start pushing the barriers back, then actually there's no scope. Where one of the interviews that we're doing this week is a guy with George Bourne, he won the under-23 world champs last year at rowing. And George had he won't mind me saying this because we've had the conversation openly before, he had a bit of a mind barrier on actually a certain time on his erg. Couldn't get past it. And all he'd done is just put that barrier there and then stepped away from the barrier. So he kept looking at this barrier. It was like, I think it was 6 minutes. I'm sure it was 6 minutes on an erg. And he kept saying, Graham, I can't get past this. I can't get past this. And I was like, well, why? And we just worked it out that he just emotionally put this 6 minute barrier right there. So all we needed to do is to get him to walk up to the barrier, open the barrier up. And actually, when you start looking past that barrier, actually it's huge. There's a huge amount of scope that's there. And then he sent me a message where he broke, and I think he did something like, it wasn't even 5:59, it was like 5:56 or something like that. So it just smashed through the barrier. And this was before he got the chance to go to World Champs last year. And that was purely because he just didn't understand how to walk up the barrier. He was frightened of it, but he was comfortable where he was. So it's a mindset thing, and it's a combination of all these other things that allows a person to do that.
It throws my mind back to a rower at Durham who I was working with. I think he got a World Under-23 medal at the time. We're talking about over 10 years ago now. But we're doing some clean maxes in the gym at Durham. And he goes for this clean max. And as he goes to catch it, he loses his balance, falls back, lands on his back with the bar rolls over and sort of above his face, over his head, onto the floor. And we're like, oh, right, well, what's happened here? And normally if something like that happens, well, it normally doesn't happen. I've only ever seen it once or twice. It's like, it's a bit of an incident in the gym. It's a near miss. It's reported. It's this and that. Yeah. Now this guy rolls it back onto the platform, takes a breath, goes down, lifts the thing, completes the lift. And to me, that told me something about his mentality and his approach to things. Like, he fell off the horse, but even without any input from us, technically or encouragement-wise or anything else, or just given that moment to gather himself, boom, went in and lifted the thing. And like, right, this guy's got that winning mentality, and it was just demonstrated through that one event, of which there's a number of components going into that.
But if you think about that, when we're kids as well, we learn that lesson early. So at what stage do we stop learning the lesson? Because, you've got kids and I've got kids, and I taught Jess how to, I think it was last summer, to ride a bike in the park. She fell off. And the first thing was, right, get back on, let's have another go. And she fell off. Okay, let's get back on, have another go. At some stage, though, and whether it's ego, whether it's the fact that we have, too much inflation of who we are at 12s, 14s, 16s, whatever it may be, at some stage we lose that. And we become either too comfortable with where we are and who we think we are, I guess big fish, small pond mentality, or we're too frightened to push the barrier in order to find out how far we can go, because behind that barrier is quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely that, but I think there's something even more simplistic than that. It's like you look at, learning to walk. How many times you fall on your backside as a child learning to walk, but
Yeah.
why is it that you keep doing it? And it's because you're not scared of failure.
Yeah.
You're not scared of failure at a young age, or there's varying degrees of that. So my little boy Charlie, he'll have a go at stuff, like say even just reading. He'll have a go at the words because he's not scared that he might get it wrong, because he doesn't see an issue with that. Of course, there isn't an issue with that, but some people think there is. Even if it's about drawing attention to themselves in some way. I had a girl in the gym at Loughborough. The gym at Loughborough is huge. It's got like 18 weightlifting platforms, the size of a huge sports hall. There's thousands of people in there. It's noisy music. It's clattering of bars and stuff getting dropped all the time. She's doing these lifts and she wouldn't drop the bar. I'm like, Harriet, why don't you just drop the bar? It'd be much easier in your session rather than trying to control it all the way down. You don't have to do that. She's like, I don't want to draw attention to myself. And I just burst out laughing. I was like, look around. Says, look at what's happening here. Is anyone going to take any notice of another bar dropping on the floor? And she's like, yeah, you're right. But it had to be pointed out to her. And it wasn't even like a failure type situation. It was just about drawing attention, people just having a go at stuff. Whereas one of my girls, and she's just very much the other way. She'll get off a bike across the road instead of just riding across because she's just a bit more fearful of stuff. And that sort of leads to putting maybe some of these barriers in the way as well. And we just need to have a go at stuff, not about being gung-ho, and it's not about putting yourself in a dangerous situation, but asking yourself that question, well, what's the worst that can happen? Or do you think I can do that lift, Jaron? We'll soon find out, won't we? How many times I've said that in my coaching career? Yeah, we'll soon find out. Do you think I'll run all right today? Don't know. Soon find out. Let's have a go.
And that's certainly where that 1% goes. And, you hear things like some marginal gains, slight edge approach, 1% all of the time. But actually, I think for me, that shift between what you're doing now and what you can do is something that has to be done all the time. So can I lift this? Well, let's have a go and see. And actually, if you get half of it, that's better than what you did before. If you get the whole of the lift, great. Can we do 2 more then? Because actually maybe you've been holding back a little bit. So there's all these concepts about individually pushing themselves and developing and learning and growing, but also from a coach's point of view as well. The more you know the athlete and work with the athlete, you can help and guide them to do that, because the fear might be holding them back and they just need to have one of those, let's call it a difficult conversation, because it doesn't have to be in conflict. It can be difficult, that makes people feel a little bit awkward, but it's for all the right reasons.
Yeah, and often the learning doesn't take place at all during that conversation, because some of the barriers are up and offensive at times. I reflect on that. It was the same with that conversation with Dave in the car on the way home from that training session, whereas I didn't say anything because I was like, it was uncomfortable, but you reflect on that, you absorb that, you take that in, and you're like, yeah, he's right. You still don't like to hear it, but you agree with it, and you get on with it, and you move on with yourself.
I always call it the Karate Kid syndrome. So somebody says something to you that you don't like, and you go into that Karate Kid pose straight away, don't you? Get 1 foot off the ground, completely in defense mode. I don't want to hear it. I'm hiding. Yeah. But you're right. Once you're either mature enough, or you reflect a little bit, or maybe it's said in a different way, that your mindset at that moment in time can take it on board. It allows you to then grow as well.
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, Emily was very much like that. Still is very much like that. Nicest girl you'd ever like to meet, but the competitive spirit inside of her, in whatever she's doing, you can really see come out, and that's why she's been successful. I've coached probably more physically gifted athletes, but as an all-round package, and having that sort of mentality to be able to compete and go with that as well. And just watching The Last Dance now on Netflix, the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan documentary, you can see that with Jordan. He's competitive, but in the right way. He's competitive in everything he does. But if he loses, he doesn't kick off on stuff. He doesn't throw the tables over. He accepts it gracefully. He doesn't like it at all, and will go away and make himself better for it. But you can feel when watching that, he's got this steely determination that he does not want to lose at all, and he will do everything possible to win, but do it well. And it's not the win at all costs. It's the win which way I can.
And I love that quote about Jordan, where he's taken 9,000 shots in his career and he's missed so many and lost so many games. It's brilliant because as a sports person, we do that all the time, but we just don't teach kids, I don't think, early enough to accept the fact that it's okay if you lose as long as you get better. And as long as you're trying to find a way to improve. What you don't want to do is lose and completely underperform. Because that's a box none of us ever want to be in. And I still don't want to be in that now. I don't mind losing on a tennis court now if I've done okay and done the best that I can at my age group and my current ability levels, my current fitness levels, that's fine. But kids, I think, get in this mentality that they think they should win all of the time. And then all of a sudden when they can't, it's kind of like, okay, I'm not very good. Well, no, you are very good, but what have you learned from it? How do you get better from that? And how do you make sure that that doesn't happen next time?
A real thing for us with our kids, you know, I've got my middle daughter, Esme. So she does cubs, football a couple of times a week, gymnastics, swimming, a little bit of hockey. What else has she got on? She's got something else on. School as well, hi. So she does about 4 or 5 different sporting activities each week. Oh, athletics as well. She does athletics, and you know, she'll have a good go at everything. The first thing I ask her after our football games is not did you score, not did you win. I ask her, did you enjoy it?
Yeah. And
do you feel you put a good effort in today? And if she did both of those things, I'm absolutely fine with it. And then she might say after that, oh yeah, I scored a goal as well, or I was in goal for a bit and I saved a goal. Right, brilliant. Right, that's fantastic. But the first bit is enjoyment and effort. And if those two things are there, whereas we see a lot of other parents, and my wife Susan was an international athlete as well, and we sort of have a laugh in many respects about what other parents are like, how pushy they are with their kids, and how even at 8 or 9 years old, they want their kids to be in the top of this, or they want to be getting that, and you're like, chill out. Like, are they enjoying it? Because some of this pushing is going to lead to them not enjoying it, and not putting the efforts in that one, and turn their back on it. Whereas we're just like, explore it, have a good go. We are pretty harsh on them in terms of making sure they're doing something. So if Esme turns around and says, right, I want to pack in with athletics, like, well, you're going to have to pick something else up in its place, or you're going to have to do a bit more of this. Like, they're not allowed to do nothing, but want them to explore different things. So I found a basketball and I was out for a dog walk a couple of weeks ago. Took it home, pumped it up, worked fine. Charlie's always been talking about basketball. So now he's got his basketball, and every day he's asking to go on the street and play Kirby with it, or do some bounce practice. And he's getting better and better with it. And I just want to encourage those little bits and pieces. Because at that age, no one remembers, the world champion at 12 years old or something. Yeah. We don't have to be brilliant at that age, but we'll have to be getting engaged, starting to enjoy things, learning a bit about ourselves to try and build on. I had an athlete I worked with at Loughborough who was just so terrified of failure. And we actually had this conversation. I says, have you seen ice skating before? She says, yeah, I've seen ice skating. So, when they do the turns in the air and land and go on. So, do you think first time they tried that, it worked? It's like, no. Says, how many times do you think that person's fallen over on hard ice, landed, bruised their backside, twisted their back, hurt their shoulder, put their hand down, hurt their wrist, before they got that right and could do it right repeatedly whenever they wanted to? And they're like, it's probably quite a bit. Yeah, says they probably have fallen doing that move more times than they've actually successfully done it. Like, very much like your Jordan thing. And she's like, yeah. So you're going out there and maybe not quite running the target time that you've set for yourself, which is actually quicker than what I've set for you. You're walking away thinking of some sort of failure, whereas actually you put the effort in, you enjoyed what you were doing, and you've still made an improvement. And she had to have these things drawn out for her because it was very much a light on, light off situation of it was either a pass or a fail. And it's not necessarily that. Everything's got learning to it. The ice dancers had to fall on the backside loads of times. We've had to miss loads of baskets in order to get a basket in. No one chucked the basketball first time it went in, and then it went in again, and then again, and again. It's pointing out the obvious, but it's just not able. Athletes are sometimes just not able to see it.
Yeah, and I do think that's sometimes parents, or sometimes ego, or sometimes just general maturation. The light bulb comes on, they kind of go, oh my God, that's why Jared got me to run up that stupid hill in the snow in my spikes. Because once it comes on, that's where learning and growth really takes place, which is a fab thing. Jared, listen, I'm conscious of time. I just want to thank you very much for your time and effort in terms of doing this, and hopefully anybody who's watching can pick up some good tips. If I finish off in terms of, we always talk about playground to podium, and you went to the Sydney Olympics. It was the Sydney Olympics, wasn't it? Maybe we should just change that to South Shields to Sydney. Maybe that's a much nicer podium to buy into.
Yeah.
And it begins
Yeah.
with an S, and I like that. So if you're going to say, I'm going to pick two questions here. One is top 3 tips for how important S&C is in terms of any athlete. Why would you?
Well, I think it underpins a lot of what you're doing. If your coach is asking you to do something from a technical point of view and you're unable to do that because of physical restriction, that's a real disappointment. You should, have the physical attributes in place to be able to put the technical stuff on top of that. And in order to do the tactical stuff well, you've got to have that technical in place. So it goes physical, technical, tactical in that sort of order. So a wide range of physical competencies will feed up that chain and allow you to do that.
And for me, I asked that question because we talked again about earlier. I went from playing probably 5 hours of tennis a week to playing 5 hours a day in the States. And we had no S&C. So the results of no S&C is 2 shoulder ups. The first one ended any kind of chance that I had of any kind of long-term career anyway. And I was out for 15 months. 2 groin ups, so bilateral Gilmore's groin. And by the way, rehab on that really hurts a lot. And you've really got to be comfortable and trust your physio who's doing the rehab, by the way. And 1 knee up. And I've done a lot of work with Derek Redmond over the last sort of five or so years with doing psychometric assessments. And one of the things that Derek said when we had a chat, when we were talking about injuries and stuff like that, he said, Graham, I've had 7 just on my Achilles. And again, maybe probably similar reasons, S&C, without that, the guys at Durham call it robustness, building people to be more robust than actually trying to fix, things when they've got broke. So for me, S&C is pivotal these days for developing any kind of athlete. And then I guess that part 2 to that question is, and let's use our South Shields to Sydney kind of pathway, because I'm starting to like that more and more now. If you've got an athlete who's, let's say, from South Shields, it could be anywhere else in the country, and maybe they're looking at themselves right now and they're not seeing themselves in the top 10 in the country under 10, or they're not at a football academy by the age of 12, or they're not doing it on the international stage at 14. What would be your couple of tips in terms of, how do they keep going? We use the word resilience quite a lot these days. It's quite a buzzword, isn't it? How do we keep them going? How do we keep them focused? How do we just maintain that motivation to hang in a little bit? What would you say to them in order to keep them involved in the game?
My first question would be, why did you do it in the first place? And it's normally going to be an answer because they enjoy doing it. Like, I would have still been, I don't know how long I would have went on for, but I would have still trained and competed for a good number of years, regardless of the level that I reached, because I just enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed the feeling of warm day. And it happened to be that because of my attitude and my work ethic and the training and the circumstance with my brother being able to coach me and all that sort of stuff, that I went on and made those improvements. But I just never put a barrier in front of myself. And I stopped competing when I stopped enjoying it. And I started doing other people's qualifying times that I do. And I felt there was other demands on there. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I wanted to get back to just enjoying it. So that'll be a bit, try and enjoy what you're doing and just try and make progress in all areas. I just don't see why people should put limitations on themselves. It's not saying that everyone can be a world champion, because they can't. But people just shouldn't put that limit. This is a good story. My dad leaded the windows one time. So he had this thing of lead that you could then put on the windows, make crisscrosses or whatever shapes on the windows on the house. And he had some left over. And our toilet upstairs in Julian Avenue had like the big frosted glass on the toilet door. For whatever reason, my dad made some Olympic rings out of this lead stuck onto the toilet door. So it was always known when people came around, you got Olympic rings on your toilet door. And it was just little things like that you, like, looking back now, just being aware of and being around and having that, on the toilet, you see that every day. You see these Olympic rings every day walking past it. My dad had these shoes with Olympic rings on. And I was like, Dad, your shoes are old now. The Olympics were 2 years ago. And he's like, son, the Olympics are always around. And I was like, I just remember these conversations. I would have been 7 years old when I had that conversation with my dad. It always stuck in my mind. And just having like these little triggers, but not having any barriers in the way of things would be the advice I would give to people from every world champion is from some town somewhere, has grown up and put their efforts in, and why can't it be you? It might not be, but you give yourself your best opportunity.
Absolutely. And Jared, I think it's fab ending to a great catch up. And we haven't spoken for a couple of years, so that's brilliant. And I'm really pleased that you and Susan are having a good time up in Dunfermline. For those people who haven't subscribed, because you have to do that these days, don't you? Got a point down the bottom for people to subscribe to the channel. Hopefully they got some great learning and information out of this, and we've done the 30 days just for one, a bit of fun, and two, just to hopefully share some knowledge and maybe inspire the next Olympian. And you're going to go out on the following weekend with 2 other Olympians and a Premier League football player. And hopefully, one of the kids will just watch one of you 4 in terms of that weekend and everybody else over the 30 days, and maybe just pick up some inspiration, pick up that little bit, 1% extra, start going in hurdling barriers next to the pub. I'm not sure if you remember what the pub was called. Right next
is it Kirkpatrick's?
Kirkpatrick's, fab. I was probably in Kirkpatrick's while you were hurdling outside. And I can't believe our Tyneside Council are going to take all the responsibility for putting the right humps in, the right hurdles, and making sure that road didn't get any snow on during the winter to maintain you as a successful Olympian and an athletic runner over the years. So, Jared, thank you very much for that. And what I'll do is I'll pull a little top tips PDF from you together. We'll add it onto the website. If people want to download some stuff, they can do, and some activities about why do you want to do this, what are your top 3 sort of barriers, and how are you going to get over them, something like that, in terms of them taking some reflective points away from this and some learning as well. And then just download it for free and hopefully have some fun with it. But thank you very much for your time, Jared, and we'll speak soon.
No problem. Been great.